The big political news last night was that Donald Trump has supposedly started sending vetting materials and questionnaires to a variety of potential vice presidential nominees. The names include Doug Burgum, Marco Rubio, Byron Donalds, Elise Stefanik, J.D. Vance, and Tim Scott. Of course, the list is subject to change, so probably doesn't mean a whole lot at this stage. We have no idea, what to make of it exactly. I will say that most of the names on the list, but not all, are rather uninspired, and a few of them would be actively bad and harmful choices. So I hope that's not the direction he goes. At the same time, what we can be pretty sure of is that right now, and for the last several months, the Democratic Party has been working on ways to attack every single one of those potential nominees, of course, and none of the names on the short list are a surprise, so they've presumably been digging up opposition research and monitoring everything these politicians say, hoping they can catch a slip up or take something out of context. And that's to be expected at this point, of course. But even with that expectation in mind, the attack that's unfolding right now on one of those potential vice presidential candidates, Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida, is worth talking about. It's maybe the single most revealing smear campaign of the election cycle so far. On Tuesday, Donalds was speaking at an event in Philadelphia, along with Texas Congressman Wesley Hunt. And the point of the event, apparently, was for the Trump campaign to reach more black voters by speaking honestly about the challenges that black communities are facing right now. Of course, the main challenge in black communities, as I've said many times and many other people have said, is the epidemic of fatherlessness. It's the collapse of the nuclear family. There can't be any problem bigger than that when your nuclear family has collapsed. Black Americans have the highest rate of out-of-wedlock births as compared to every other racial group by far. Roughly 77% of black children born in 2015 were out of wedlock. That's the most recent year I found data for this. Hispanics had a much lower rate at 56%, but still too high, followed by whites at 30% and Asians at 27%. All of those numbers are too high. But with the black family, the numbers are, of course, the highest. It's not a coincidence, by the way, that if you were to look at a list of average household incomes in the USA by race, it would be the exact inverse of the fatherless list. So Asians have the highest household income, followed by white, then Hispanic, then black. As far as I can tell, these numbers have held steady for decades. They've been consistent long enough that many people have come to believe that they're inevitable. But that's not true. There was, in fact, a time in American history where whites and blacks had roughly the same chances of growing up in a single-family home. This was a period when most black women got married before they had kids, and it's not ancient history we're talking about. I'm talking about the first half of the 20th century, and in particular, the 1950s and 60s. At the event in Philadelphia, Byron Donalds addressed all of this directly. He began by talking about his own personal experiences with fatherhood. And then he pointed out that two-parent black households weren't always an anomaly. It didn't used to be this way. Watch.
During Jim Crow, the black family was together.
That's right.
During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people always have been conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then H.E.W., Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are. What's happened in America the last 10 years, and I say it because it's my contemporaries, it's Wesley's contemporaries, you're starting to see more black people be married in homes, raising kids. It's when you home with your wife raising your kids, and then you look at the world, you're saying, now wait a minute, time out. This does not look right. How can I get something to my kids? It goes back to the conversation of generational wealth. Not just having a job, generational wealth. I'm looking at my kids. How can my kids be on my shoulders when they take off in life? That's what's happening.
So everything that Byron Donalds just said there is true. It's not even remotely debatable, in fact. From 1890 to 1950, black women had an even higher marriage rate than white women. And in the 1950s, the rates were about equal. Quoting from the Hoover Institution, in 1950, the percentages of white and African-American women aged 15 and over who were currently married were roughly the same, 67% and 64% respectively. But by 1998, the percentage of currently married white women had dropped by 13% to 58%, but the drop among African-American women was 44% to 36%, more than 3 times larger. Additionally, between 1950 and 1997, the proportion of black births to teenage unwed mothers rose by 166%. Now, any political party that wanted to reduce black crime rates and ensure that more black children go to school, get good jobs, want to reduce poverty in the black community, would be talking about these figures nonstop. They're clearly the key to understanding what's wrong in black communities and how to fix them. But Democrats very desperately don't want to have that conversation because, as Byron Donalds said, it implicates them, starting with Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society welfare programs that arose from the Civil Rights era and going on from there. Now, as the Harvard professor Paul Peterson put it, quote, some programs actively discouraged marriage because welfare assistance went to mothers so long as no male was boarding in the household. Marriage to an employed male, even one earning the minimum wage, placed at risk a mother's economic well-being. Peterson crunched numbers and found that, quote, in 1975, a household head would have to earn $20,000 a year to have more resources than what could be obtained from Great Society programs. Now, adjusted for inflation, that means households would need to bring in $100,000 to match what the government would give them for free. In other words, the government was providing a massive economic incentive for poor mothers to raise children alone in single-parent homes. And because black mothers are an extremely poor demographic group, the incentive affected black families the most. Now, it's not to say that this is the only explanation that can account for the decline in the black family unit. There's a lot else going on. You can also look at the decline of industry, the offshoring of manufacturing jobs, the rise of feminism, which cannot be underestimated as a factor, the influence of the entertainment industry, and so on. But no reasonable person can doubt that a $100,000 government incentive to break up family homes was indeed a major factor that contributed to broken homes. And a serious political party, one that cared about black communities, would learn from that disaster and immediately reform, if not actually abolish, these kinds of welfare programs. But the Democratic Party has no interest in acknowledging any responsibility for their role in creating the crisis in the black community. After all, a core plank of Democratic Party mythology is that the civil rights movement was an unbridled good and that no mistakes whatsoever were made in the process of creating the welfare programs that have persisted for generations. So instead, the Democrats' top representative in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, just decided to simply lie about everything Byron Donalds said. Watch.
Mr. Speaker, it has come to my attention that a so-called leader has made the factually inaccurate statement that black folks were better off during Jim Crow. That's an outlandish, outrageous, and out-of-pocket observation. We were not better off when a young boy named Emmett Till could be brutally murdered without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when black women could be sexually assaulted without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be systematically lynched without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when children could be denied a high-quality education without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be denied the right to vote without consequence because of Jim Crow. How dare you make such an ignorant observation? You better check yourself before you wreck yourself.
It's kind of incredible how bad this guy's Obama impression is, or maybe it's supposed to be MLK. He kind of has the cadence down, I guess, or he's trying. Then he starts repeatedly attacking a statement that no one made. Byron Donalds did not say that black Americans were better off during Jim Crow. He said black families were together during that time, and they're not together now. Those are two distinct statements. But Hakeem Jeffries apparently can't grasp the distinction, or he can grasp it, but he's pretending that he can't. So he just makes a complete fool of himself, attacking a straw man over and over again until he ends by somehow embarrassing himself even further. You better check yourself before you wreck yourself, really? We're quoting, Ice Cube songs now on the House floor? This is what passes for rhetorical genius in the Democratic Party post-Obama. This is the guy that'll make the Speaker of the House if they ever get back the majority. But Hakeem Jeffries wasn't alone, of course. The brain trust at the Congressional Black Caucus put out a statement demanding that Byron Donalds apologize for telling the truth. They wrote, quote, "This is a pattern of embracing racist ideologies that we see time and again within the MAGA Republican Party. Representative Donalds is playing his role as the mouthpiece who will say the quiet parts out loud that many will not say themselves. His comments were shameful and beneath the dignity of a member of the House of Representatives. He should apologize, she should immediately offer an apology to black Americans for misrepresenting one of the darkest chapters in our history for his own political gain." Well, they got one part right. Byron Donalds did indeed say the quiet parts out loud. He said the one thing the Democrats simply cannot allow anyone to say, which is that the policies of the Democratic Party drastically increased black dependency on the government and in the process destabilized the family structure. That is, which again is a fact. And you notice that none of these people that are complaining about Byron Donalds, none of them have even attempted to claim that he's wrong about what he actually said, because it's just a fact. It's an undeniable, indisputable, verifiable fact. And that's the third rail that Democrats don't want any politician to go anywhere near, even though with every passing year, it's getting harder and harder to deny it. The Democratic Party has controlled pretty much every major urban center in this country for decades, and after all that, they've only made things worse. You know, Selma, the site of the famous civil rights marches, the city that's been run by Democrats in perpetuity, well, they just went to virtual classes a few weeks ago, not because of COVID, but because too many children are getting shot. Watch.
Happening now, some Selma City schools moved to virtual learning today over concerns about gun violence. Selma superintendent says there were multiple shootings over the weekend, and at the direction of local law enforcement, Selma High School and Saints Virtual Academy Alternative Learning Center were asked to go virtual learning. WSFA 12 News anchor Judd Davis is live in the newsroom with more. Judd, how long will this change be in place?
Well, Bethany, those schools you mentioned will be virtual for today only, at least for now, and all other schools in Selma will not be impacted. The school superintendent says over the weekend there were several shootings involving teenagers and one teen was seriously injured. No word on where those shootings happened or if any arrests have been made. Now, we have tried to get in contact with the Selma Police Department. So far, no word back to get any new information. The school superintendent says, quote, the Selma City School District has decided to transition to virtual learning until the suspects are apprehended or until police presence is increased in our schools. This decision comes out of concerns of possible retaliation. So it is possible the virtual learning could be extended, but so far we're told it is just for today. Bethany?
Well, that's always a sign that you're, that everything's going well in your community when you have to shut down schools because there's so much violence. And they're not even talking, apparently, about necessarily threats against the school itself, but just in the community. The community itself is so violent that it'd be too dangerous for kids to go to school. Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic Party never talk about Selma, even though Democrats have been running it for decades. The city that became famous during the civil rights movement remains to this day one of the poorest places in the entire country. I mean, it's so dangerous now that they're keeping children home from school. That doesn't necessarily mean the people of Selma were better off under Jim Crow, however Hakeem Jeffries wants to define better off. But it does mean that the government certainly hasn't helped matters in the wake of the civil rights movement. If there's ever going to be a return to normalcy in Selma and dozens of other cities like it, then it's necessary to first acknowledge that LBJ's great society and its offshoots haven't actually created great societies. They've done the opposite. Byron Donalds made that case this week, and by completely melting down in response, Democrats in the House have admitted, basically, that he was right. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.